Good afternoon, everybody. Thank you very much for coming to the last session of the conference. I thought we might just start by zeroing in on what some of the drivers for product stewardship actually are. I'm sure that some of this will be covered by the speakers, but we have a great panel who can share some insight into the application of those principles. So the things that is driving us as stewardship organisations starts with shared responsibility, environmental and safety outcomes. We just had the session earlier on circular economy, and I think stewardship's absolutely fundamental to really achieving that. One of the things for voluntary schemes, having fair and equitable funding models, but at the same time having an opportunity for increased competition, innovation and efficiency. Transparency and accountability, also another key issue. And then ultimately, behavioural change, right? We're wanting everybody to understand how to deal with their products safely and to get involved in that behavioural change. Some current issues at the end that we might focus in on that I might encourage my panellists to talk at that I've just heard over the last few days as we've all been talking about how we deal with some of these waste problems. With regards to stewardship, do we regulate or not regulate stewardship? I think there are advantages to both. So is there a middle ground that we can come up with that gives us the best of both worlds and delivers real value to all of the people involved? Also, how can we make it easy for brands who have to deal with a multitude of schemes? There's nearly 90 in the pipeline, and that certainly presents some real challenges for them. So I think that presents some opportunities for us in how we deal with them. Another key issue is accessibility. How do we provide efficient and accessible options in a country that's so geographically spread and really with a very small population? How do we create those economies of scale in that environment? What does end-of-life transparency really look like and truly mean? And what does success look like? So it's with that little bit of context, I'd like to invite Claire Kneller to come up from RAP Asia Pacific and get the ball rolling. Thanks, Claire.
Thank you so much. This is like my third thing of the day, so if I start losing my voice halfway through, I apologise. Yes, so I'm going to talk about the National Clothing Product Stewardship Scheme. So if you were here last year, you might remember that I stood up and talked about the clothing problem in Australia, and we were kind of pretty close to the beginning of the project that has designed this scheme. So I'm actually really thrilled to be standing here and talking about what the scheme actually will look like and actually will do. We were hoping to have launched it by now, but ministerial availability put paid to that. So it will be launched on the 7th of June, and after that the full scheme design report and the roadmap will be publicly available, so I highly recommend you go and check those out. So, I know I'm preaching to the choir here, but I just thought it would be useful to kind of contextualise why we need a scheme for clothing. Clothing and textiles is the 4th most polluting industry on the planet. We all buy too many clothes, and then, and this is a global challenge, there's really nothing good to do with them at the end of their useful life. Like, we actually have good pathways for donation, but at the end of life, there's very little recycling capacity. So we've got this kind of society-wide imperative. We've got a fashion industry or an apparel industry that is under global pressure to act. We've got a trend towards greater regulation. We've got a ton of stuff going to landfill here in Australia, 227,000 tonnes. That's just of clothing. That's not textiles. If you include textiles, it's a much bigger number. The minister, the government have set an expectation that this needs to happen, and we need to de-risk that transformation. So the way that we've approached this is we've really looked at it in terms of what does the industry need to do collectively that no single member of that industry can do alone. So what is the scheme? So it's really looking at that whole life cycle of clothing. So it's right from the design stage through to how it is made, how it is brought to the market, how it's circulated and recirculated, and then ultimately, only at the end of its useful life, how it is recycled in Australia to really look at creating that circular economy by 2030. It incorporates all new clothing that is imported into or manufactured in Australia. And that's regardless of whether that clothing is actually sold. So if you're a brand and a retailer and you've got unsold stock that you've brought into the country, that still counts. That financial contribution is managed by an independent product stewardship organisation, and it's paid by the brand owners or the stewards on each new item of clothing that they place on the market. So we use place on the market as shorthand for all of everything that they procure or commission or manufacture themselves. So if you were in the previous circular economy session, hopefully you'll recognise these R strategies. And this is really what we're focusing on in the product stewardship scheme. So it's looking at the highest and best use for clothing. And these are in order, and that's the order that we want to work on. So recycling is really important, but you'll notice that recycling is pretty close actually to the bottom of this hierarchy. We really want to be driving clothing up the hierarchy for as long as possible before it becomes to its eventual end of life. And we recognise that clothing will come to the end of its life, and at that point we should be recycling it, but we want to delay that for as long as possible. So we're looking at prevention, we're looking at local reuse here in Australia, we're looking at reuse in other countries around the world, high value recycling, by which we mean making clothes out of clothes, making other high value products out of clothes and keeping that material in use or available for reuse and recycling for as long as possible. Downcycling is the kind of next best option, then looking at biological treatment, by which we mean composting, which Australia is actually a pretty world leading in that regard, and then finally waste to energy and landfill. We all love a Sankey diagram. I think this is about the fifth one that I've seen. But yeah, so this really just gives you an idea of how clothing currently circulates in the economy. And so, as you probably know, the thickness of the bar denotes a bigger chunk of the material. So that bottom section there, the 227,000 tonnes that's going to landfill, is, you know, a big proportion of the clothing that is coming onto the market in Australia every year. And just to kind of set that into context, we're not very good at capturing and recycling that. And there's a few reasons for that. So this is not a bash at the recycling industry. And there are people in this sector who are working really hard to try and increase the capacity and the capability of the recycling sector. But we're not very good at capturing that material and recycling it back into clothes. What we do include as recycled content currently is mostly plastic bottles. And plastic bottles actually are quite good at being turned back into new plastic bottles, not fleeces. And so really we want to be focusing on keeping that high value recycling of plastic bottles going and using the clothing inputs for new clothing. So what does that scheme look like? So we went through a very intensive co-design process. So this was not the consortium coming together in a little room and thinking, what should we do? We did a massive amount of consultation and co-design. So that's in fact, that's not even everyone we spoke to, because I was looking at it this morning, I was like, oh, there's at least 3 people that should also be on there. But you can see, like, we talked to a lot of people. So we, in that process, we asked them 2 key questions. So a quite specific one, so what would it take to get over 200,000 tonnes of clothing out of Australian landfill? But then a much broader, more strategic one, which is about that collective ambition. So what can a product stewardship scheme do that any single organisation can't do alone? And one of the things that we found when we started this co-design process with the industry is, contrary to what RAP experienced in the UK when we started this conversation about 6 or 7 years ago, when every retailer said, we don't care. What happened here was completely different. In that time, there's been a real change of attitude, and the response that we got from the businesses here was almost universally, we get it. We get that we need to be doing something. We're trying to do stuff already. We don't know whether that's the right thing to do or not. We don't know how impactful it is, and we're struggling to see what that vision is for the industry. What does a circular industry look like? What's my part in it? How do we get to that point? And so there was a real kind of ground level of support for the concept of the scheme. And so we've had a real amazing engagement from the industry. And that's from the Kmarts of this world right down to some very, very niche, small or micro brands that are operating in this country. So some key insights from that. They all just basically said, please just regulate, actually. A voluntary scheme is awesome, but we'd rather just have a level playing field. Regulate, it makes everyone have to join. It means we're not supporting free riders once we've joined, and it makes that internal conversation so much easier. I go to my CEO, I say there's some new regulation coming, we have to join the scheme. He goes, here's your budget, here's your team, make it happen. So the recommendation, what you'll see in the report when it gets published is, we said we can't wait for a regulatory scheme to get going. Like, we've got to do some stuff now. And actually implementing a regulatory scheme takes quite a long time, and there's quite surprisingly a heavy process that the government has to run in order to do that. And so what will happen is, in the interim period, we set up the scheme as a voluntary scheme, and industry and the PSO continue to advocate to government to get that regulatory pathway going. As I said, really high engagement from all of the stakeholders right across the piece, so from the brands and retailers, but from the recycling sector, from the charitable reuse sector, the whole thing. Everyone was really engaged and really willing to share their insights, and we're very grateful for that. And everyone also really recognized that that collaboration piece is critical. We can't do this alone. So yeah, just a little bit on the collaboration. So the consortium's led by the Australian Fashion Council. That's why these slides look much nicer than my slides ever would. Charitable Recycling Australia, you heard from Omar this morning. He was a key part of the consortium. Sustainable Resource Use. So some of you might know Peter Allen, not that Peter Allen, our Peter Allen. He just wears regular trousers. He's a real data wonk. He's great. He did loads of kind of data analysis for us. QUT, Alice Payne from QUT, who what she doesn't know about the fashion industry is honestly not worth knowing. And obviously RAP Asia Pacific, that's us. We also had what we call 5 collaboration partners. So the 2 retail peak industry bodies and the 2 recycling peak industry bodies, plus the Product Stewardship Centre of Excellence, who lent their feedback and guidance to us the whole way through. We had a reference group. So that was drawn from people all across the sector, because one of the things that's critical about this is you cannot just pull a lever in one part of the supply chain. If you want systemic change, you have to engage the whole system, and you have to figure out what levers you need to pull all across that system, what the consequences of pulling those levers is going to be, where it might be intended or unintended, and how that all links together. And you can't do that unless you have everybody in the room. We also did a bunch of workshops. We did loads of one-on-one meetings, and we did 3 town halls, and they are available, recorded on the AFC website. So if anyone would like to go and watch those, you can do. So, what does it actually look like? So, the idea of a product stewardship scheme is pretty straightforward. If you're a steward, if you put the product on the market, you pay the contribution. The contribution that we are recommending for the product stewardship scheme for clothing is 4 cents per unit. Now, interestingly, nearly everyone that we speak to goes, oh gosh, that's not very much, is it? And when you compare it with something like a CDS scheme, which is 11 cents per unit, it's not. But you also have to think about the fact that there's almost 1 billion items of clothing coming onto the market every year. So the way that we came to this 4 cents was not, we said, what do we think it should be? 4 cents sounds about right. Is what we actually did was some quite complex modeling that said, what is it that the scheme needs to do? What are the activities that it needs to manage or facilitate or deliver in order to create this transition from a linear to a circular economy? And how much will that cost? And if that's how much it costs, how much do we need to charge the businesses who are joining the scheme to raise that amount of money? So it's really based on what we said we needed or what we said the industry needs to deliver on those activities, which is essentially to create this shift towards this circular economy. So that's kind of a linear example. So you start at the bottom with kind of fabric manufacture, or even further down with design or fabric production, all the way through to the wearer and to the end, this end, where you're essentially chucking it in the bin. And what we want to get to is something like this. So where your clothing retail is inextricably linked back into the recycling piece. What that doesn't show as well is also kind of sustainable or regenerative inputs that is included in there as part of that kind of shift to circularity. There are other elements around shifting to circularity and putting us on the net zero trajectory around decarbonising your manufacturing and all of that kind of stuff. But this diagram really is kind of drilling into what is the circular clothing piece. So it's that shift where that unwearable fraction, which is what is currently going into landfill, gets recirculated to the back into the industry. And what we said was there are 4 central activities that we need to deliver on to make this happen. So, as with anything, for circularity, you've got to get in at the design stage. So how do you design garments that are more durable, have recycled content, and are recyclable? How do you then bring them to a market in a different way? So we're looking at reuse and resale, but also rental, subscriptions, made to order, and then how do you close the loop on that material? And what underpins all of that is the behavior change piece, which is really critical. I'm going to jump through this, because this is essentially an example of how all of that gets delivered. So essentially the money comes in, so this revenue piece on the top left, into the, I know, it's useless, into the product stewardship organisation. You've then got this kind of technical support, you've got support for collection and sorting to close that material loop, and you've got the kind of circular business models and the design for circularity, bringing it back into clothing manufacture. So how do you then say, all right, well, how do you spend that money to deliver on that? So whole bunch of different activities, and what you can see is there's actually a big chunk of the money that supports the collection, sorting, and recycling of that clothing, because it's a big market failure, and it's expensive. It's really expensive to collect unwearable clothing, to sort it to the standard that's required for high-value recycling, and to get it to a recycling plant. So some big market failures in that area that we want to try and fix, as well as all of that other stuff as well. We think we'll get about 60% of the market signing up to the scheme, which is, I think, optimistic, but doable. And that generates an income of around $36 million a year. And if you include products that are eligible for eco-modulation, that takes it to 33 million. So eco-modulation is where if you're doing something good, you pay less. So if your clothing has more recycled content in it, or if you're making it more easily recyclable, so making it from monomaterials, you get a discount on your 4 cents. down to 3 cents. And that's how that money kind of splits across the thing. So as you can see, big chunk of that money being spent on recycling, market development, but also lots on that kind of technical work, on the education. And again, it all works together. You can't have one slice of the pie without the others. Trust and accountability, really critical for the industry. Industry is funding this. It's a lot of money. So how do you make sure people are doing what they say they're going to do? So there'll be some auditing and compliance activity in there. We're talking about collecting all wearable and unwearable clothing, so we're not artificially separating those two. It's really critical that there's a very strong measurement and reporting element in there, and that transparency and accreditation gives that confidence, both from within the industry, but also outside that industry as well. So just very quickly, you can see on there the scheme benefits. I'm not going to go through all of those because I'm preaching to the choir a little bit, and I'm sure none of you are like, oh no, product stewardship scheme for clothing is a terrible idea, we definitely shouldn't do it. But there's lots of benefits across that whole value chain that essentially is going to take us to circularity. And then I'm just going to kind of finish, I think, on this slide actually, which is about the wardrobe of the future. Has this got builds on it? Yes. So what we wanted to kind of show in the roadmap is this idea of the wardrobe of the future, where when you open your wardrobe in 2030, it will look essentially the same as it does now. There'll be a whole bunch of different clothes in there that reflect who you are, your identity, your personality. But how you acquire that clothing, and what you do with it will be different. So you'll never go and buy a new dress for a wedding. You would rent one. You have more durable clothing in that wardrobe, and lots of it is made from more renewable resources or recycled content. Most of your wardrobe is purchased secondhand. Some items you acquire through different business models, so like made to order. Those garments are designed to be kept in use for as long as possible and repairable. You keep them for a long time. You donate them when you've done with them. I'm going to stop there.
Does anybody have, we've got 2 minutes for burning questions for Claire, and then we'll have the panel discussion at the end. Question here. There is a mic to you.
Put your hand up.
Thank you, Claire, for your presentation. Just wondering, with the investment or with the money that you're getting through the future scheme, what kind of size recycling plants are we talking about here? Like, how many tonnes are you anticipating will be recycled through the scheme?
It's a good question. So there's currently 227,000 tonnes of clothing going to landfill each year. Now, obviously, what we want to do with the scheme is reduce that, not just by shifting it into recycling, but also reduce it because clothing is kept in use for longer, and actually we're overall reducing consumption. So we all buy, on average, 56 new items of clothing every year. So the only country that buys more clothes than us is the US. So we have to reduce that number. So it's a combination of actually reducing the size of the pie and then increasing the size of the slice of the pie that goes to recycling. So I think we've said in 10 years it might be 100,000 tonnes. I'd have to check on that. But I think that's roughly where we've kind of got to in terms of the immediate requirement.
One more burning question, then we'll have questions at the end as well.
Thank you. Christian from Local Government, New South Wales. So that means, is it 5 million you're spending on the education piece? So you're going to spend...
Let me go back. Oh, God. Yeah, keep talking.
5 million on, and that's going to result in a 127,000 tonne decrease in clothing consumption in Australia. That's the assumption in the...
So
the 2 million.
Yeah. So the consumption piece is linked to every slice of that pie. So it's not just about saying, oh, we spend $2 million on an education program and suddenly everyone stops buying as many clothes. It's also, a big chunk of it is, for example, that technical work that we do, or that the PSO does with industry, to say, well, actually, you need to be putting clothes on the market in a different way. How do we do better rental, for example? How do we shift more people into buying pre-loved? So every slice of that pie contributes pretty much to every one of those 4 technical areas.
I imagine, Claire, that it's kind of similar with B-Cycle too. We get to access the networks and educational activities of all of our partners in that network. So it's not just that 2 million, but it's also the work that gets done by everybody in the system.
I mean, 2 million for an education campaign is nothing, it's cents. So it has to tap in to the marketing and communications capability and budget of the stewards. Like, if you think about how much Kmart spends on advertising and talking to consumers, it's tapping into that, not just the 2 million.
Yeah. All right, thanks, Claire.
Thanks.
So next I'd like to invite Jade Barnaby to the stage. Jade's the Director of Best Practice and Innovation, working with me at Battery Stewardship Council, and very much involved in the accreditation program for the B-Cycle scheme. Thanks, Jade.
Thanks, Libby. I think this is a good follow-up from Claire. So if Claire's taken us on the journey of how to develop a scheme to launch, I'll be taking you on the next step, which is 18 months, almost 18 months from launching a scheme, just looking at the early successes, the challenges we still have, and ultimately how everyone in the room can help support ongoing successes. I just want to say I'm really excited to be speaking to you guys. I know it's the last session of the day, but you're all here because you really want to be here, so this is great. The most engaged, right? Yes. So this is what I'll be speaking to. So it's not a surprise why battery recycling and battery stewardship matters. There are more batteries out there today than there have ever been in every part of our lives, from the devices we use to communicate to how we transport and get around town, and ultimately how we work. And this is obviously going to grow in the future. In 2017, 2018, Australians purchased enough batteries to circle the planet 2.3 times, and it's estimated by 2050 this will increase up to 37 times. So whilst batteries are ubiquitous and just a part of our everyday lives, unfortunately, they come with some inherent risks. They can be corrosive, toxic, and poisonous. So they must be treated with care, not just at end of life when we're recovering them, but also when we're importing them, obviously when we're using them, and then how we store them at home. I'll get to fires in a moment, but this was some social research that we did prior to the scheme launched, about 6 months excuse me, prior to launch. And what we found was that the majority of people, unfortunately, were disposing of them. Sorry, I must have been singing too much last night. It was a good time. We're disposing of them into either the rubbish bin or to the recycling bin. We did have about 25% taking them to the available ad hoc collection network. So in New South Wales, I know there's a really well-established system of the CRCs. Aldi had a program, which is now part of our scheme, as well as Battery World and some other small retailers. So there was some options available. The remainder were storing them at home, didn't know, or something else. What we're seeing, and unfortunately I wasn't here on Tuesday, to see this presentation, but an exponential rise in battery-related fires, and this is mostly coming about from when they're being inappropriately disposed of into the rubbish or recycling bin. And this is an area of work we really want to reduce in the future because it's causing a lot of problems, costing a lot, and unfortunately potentially putting human lives at risk. Oops, I think I missed a slide. The other area that we want to address is that of, deaths due to children and animals swallowing the button cell batteries. So unfortunately in Australia, a child a month is admitted to hospital from swallowing or ingesting a button battery. One of the easiest and significant preventative measures that we can do is to tape those button cell batteries, we tape the terminals, and what happens is they can't be dissolved in the esophagus. So recently in the US, there was a child that had been admitted to hospital, had swollen a battery actually 5 weeks earlier and lived, and that was because the button terminals were protected. So it's a really significant and preventative measure we can do to save lives. So looking forward, it's probably no surprise we live in a mining country that the minerals and materials in batteries are going to increase in demand. It's actually projected to increase 500% by 2050. And this means that we have to really take into consideration the decisions of the infrastructure that we use batteries for, and also how, when we look at batteries and end of life, how we're using the waste and energy and climate policies as well. So just to give you, I guess, a visual of that, you'll see by 2050, the increase in the projections of total batteries reaching end of life. We'll still have those handheld and domestic batteries that we've been using for several decades, but really this huge transition in terms of the volume is going to come from the energy storage and the electric vehicle transition, and as we transition to a renewable energy economy and society. At the same time, unfortunately, Australia has been very bad at recovering batteries. So prior to B-Cycle launching, Australia had a recovery rate of about 10%. It was actually, that includes our lead-acid batteries. So we really have a lot to do to catch up with the rest of the world, and this is the opportunity of the Battery Stewardship Council and B-Cycle. So what is the Battery Stewardship Council, and how are we thinking how we manage dead batteries? And really we came up with B-Cycle, which we'll go into, which is the Disruptive Stewardship Scheme. So the Battery Stewardship Council is a not-for-profit which we bring together every part of the battery value chain to improve battery stewardship. Probably a slight change, Claire. I think we conceptualize stewards as everyone involved in a battery's life. So not only the manufacturers and importers, but the retailers, the users such as us, the collectors and the recyclers. And B-Cycle is authorized by the ACCC and accredited by the Australian Federal Government, and that is really the recovery or stewardship scheme that the BSC implements and administers. So the long-term goals of the scheme is that no batteries go to landfill, and we can do this through having a really strong and accessible recycling program. We want to reduce the risks of batteries to both industry and the community. We want to really develop and facilitate a domestic battery recycling and industry, not just offshoring our products to other countries that we know other recycling industries do or have done, unfortunately, and we want to be a financially sustainable scheme. So what is product stewardship? And this is our definition, but I think it's useful to really emphasize its approach to reducing the environmental and other impacts of a product by encouraging the entire value chain. Again, that's the manufacturers, importers, distributors, and people that use and take responsibility for these products. And this sort of goes into the different, I guess, principles of stewardship. You can read them in your own time, but really it's those principles of shared responsibility, enhancing a circular economy, improving the safety and environmental outcomes, ensuring there's competition, innovation, that we can demonstrate outcomes through transparency and accountability, and really that we're focused on behavior change. This slide is just to demonstrate all the work and time and effort that's gone into this scheme. It is a voluntary scheme, and I think both voluntary and regulatory schemes take a lot of time and partnership. So I'd really like to thank everyone who was involved, all levels of government, local government, state government, federal governments, industry especially. Obviously Libby have championed this, so it does take a long time. Rome isn't built in a day, but I think we had a really, we've gotten this far, so don't give up to those who are pursuing stewardship. This is also a diagram on how B-Cycle fits into the circular economy. Again, there's lots of detail here. You can look at the slides after, but it looks at the responsibility of each part of that value chain. So again, the manufacturers and importers, we've touched a lot on the concept of design, so how important design is. The retailers, when they import it and they distribute it, to make sure they're paying levy or other ways of education to the community, the consumers, that they're using the products responsibly and disposing of them just responsibly at end of life, and again, the collection and recycling network. And we've also included government here, because obviously government has a huge role to play to promoting stewardship and to procurement, but also to supporting it through harmonized legislation and other means. So the scheme itself is based on a voluntary import levy. So the levy is also 4 cents, and we have a term called equivalent battery unit. So that's basically a AA battery, which usually is about 24, 25 grams. So when a brand imports their product into Australia, and they're one of our brands, we charge them 4 cents per equivalent EBU. This levy is then passed on through the retailers, and it's managed by an independent party. And what this enables us is to our accredited participants can then have purchasing preference, so they can then purchase the brands, and it's not deemed as anti-competitive by the HCCC, and really encourages industry to participate and for us to get rid of the problem of free riders within the scheme. And I think everyone here should understand the concept of a free rider, but that would be a brand or a product that's not participating or not paying the levy. And because we are a voluntary scheme, this is a really important part of the scheme. It means that we can encourage people to participate without having regulation to, the stick to force people to participate. Although regulation, I think, to encouraging brands to participate does really help. Then we use those rebates to pay, we use those levies to pay rebates to more of the collection and recycling side of the scheme. We're a large country with small populations, so when we did research, the real inhibitor to recycling batteries was that there was a lack of aggregated volumes to support industry investing in infrastructure to recycle. So really the levies are more swayed towards supporting the transport of batteries from the regions to where the recycling takes place. So we have a $250 for metro collections and $350 for regional collections rebate that we pay the collection parties, and so those are the logistic companies. And then we have a sorting and processing rebate of $1 per kilo. So batteries have to be sorted by chemistry type. Unfortunately, not all batteries are equal. And so when they come to a recycling or a sorting facility, they have to be sorted by chemistry, so lithium-based, alkaline-based, even mercury-based, and then they're recycled according to their chemistry types. And then we also run an accreditation program that really aims to improve safety and transparency in the industry. So not all batteries are in the scheme, and I know this is a bit of a controversial issue. The ones on the far left are not in the scheme because there's either a market solution for them, so lead acid batteries, they have a value in them. We didn't need to really support that industry, and also mobile phones, laptop batteries, and exit lighting batteries because there are already other schemes that exist to support them. Currently, what is in scope are loose batteries, so these are like your handheld batteries, AA, AAA, Cs, Ds, etc. Loose batteries in a consumer product, power tool batteries, the ones you can easily remove, and e-bike and e-scooter batteries up to 5 kg. The reason why it's up to 5 kg is we are looking at expanding the network, and it requires a different sort of collection network once you get these larger batteries in the collections. And in the future, we do hope to include other types of products, such as energy storage batteries, electric vehicle batteries, and potentially embedded batteries. But we recognize that this takes a lot of consultation. There's funding needs and different collection channels that we need to look into. So we're really dealing with the historical problem and the imminent problem, and then looking forward to that emerging issue of, like, we know Australia is only in the early stages of electric vehicle adoption, but 10 years from now, when everyone's purchasing their next car, we'll be probably buying electric vehicles. What happens to those batteries at end of life? So really, it's a disruptive model. We didn't want to reinvent the wheel. We have used existing collection channels such as CDS sites, the CRCs, and any existing retail models, and we were able to really rapidly increase the accessibility of drop-off to the community. So you'll see these are some of the networks that we leverage off of. And I'll just go through some of our early achievements. So we launched in January 2022. With over 1,200 drop-off points, and now we're at 4,200. So it's really been an amazing start. Really have to thank our partners, some of them who are in the room, who really helped us expand rapidly. You'll see we have drop-off points in every single state and jurisdiction in Australia. Excuse me. If we can see that. We've collected over 1,900 ton of batteries in the first year, over 11 million button batteries. We've increased the collection up to 16% of in-scope batteries. And you'll see there, we've got, I think it's actually over 500 organizations involved, and we're at 9 accredited collectors and recyclers. So these are just some of the early stats. We released in September what we called the 6-month positive charge report, which was a snapshot of our early successes that I encourage you to read if you'd like. And then in terms of what actually happens to the batteries, and this is the most exciting part from my perspective, is that we've been able to map where the materials are going to with quite a lot of transparency, and this is also an area we're going to investigate further. But you'll see there that the alkaline and lithium batteries are primarily sorted in Victoria, where they're mechanically, processed and shredded, and then they go for further processing in Victoria, Tasmania, South Australia. The lithiums go to Victoria, Western Australia, and then a part of the lithium battery called the black mass actually is the part that currently is offshored mostly to South Korea. So you see that over 90% of what's being collected is actually being processed onshore, which is a really good early story for us, and we'd like to keep it that way and work to improve that. There were some questions, because I know there's lots of people from local government, about how we can build awareness to the actual issue of batteries and what to do and why they're dangerous. So the second half of this year, we'll be releasing a campaign, an education and awareness raising campaign, and that's going to have 3 main objectives. The first one, we want to raise awareness that there are environmental risks to human and environmental risks to using batteries and how we need to just safely dispose of them. We'd like to really work on changing behaviors and that people know where to take batteries and they need to tape them, and also how to safely dispose of them. And then the third one there is we'd like to grow visibility so that people do actually know where to take their batteries and who's involved in the scheme, such as the brands. Oops. We've got a lot of resources on our website that I encourage you to look at. So if they're consumer or community based, we've got things you can go onto the website, type in your postcode, it'll come up with a list of the closest drop-off points. We've got steps for safe storage at home, things like making sure you tape the terminals. That is the single most important thing you can do to reduce poisons and fires, and some other interesting fact sheets. Batteries are an emerging product. They're changing all the time. We get lots of questions about different scenarios, and I'll be completely honest here, we aren't always sure what's the best way to manage a battery. And so these are things we're working with the fire authorities, with the EPAs in different jurisdictions to work on, just because it is such a challenging product to manage safe as possible. We also have some really great videos on how to tape the batteries properly, the purpose of B-Cycle, and a bit of what the scheme is. So again, I encourage you to go onto the website. And then the campaign that we hope to be releasing in July will really look at some of the key messages below, and that's things like how to safely use and store your batteries at home, never dispose of batteries in the curbside bin, tape the terminals with sticky clear tape or non-conductive tape to make sure that they don't touch, and take these batteries to use to B-Cycle drop-off points. I was in a session earlier with Anne Prince, and she mentioned singing from the same song book. And these are messages we'd like to get as consistent as possible to the public. I realize if you come from local or state government, to really try to use these as your foundational messaging. And then obviously the other part of the campaign is to make sure we reduce the free riders. So we're really reliant on this voluntary levy, and even though we have amazing participation, especially from the power tool and loose battery industry, we need to make sure that we hold everyone to account who imports the battery into Australia. So that other campaign will be focused on, is your battery a B-Cycle branded battery? Are they participating in the scheme? And if they're not, we need to get them on board. Yeah, and again, we'll be doing the education piece, so the importance of taping for fire and child safety. And these are some of the images and assets you can use, especially if you sign up to become a participant. Anyway, the last bit here is really what you can do to become a battery steward. So if you're a local government, if you have a workplace, if you work for state government, you can sign up and support B-Cycle as a drop-off point. Government can sign up as well to support us through harmonization of legislation and other ways to support. Excuse me. Why is it so important for local government? We all know that people are putting batteries into their bins, so it's really important for us to get the message out that we need to remove them from the general waste and recycling, and that they should take them to a B-Cycle accredited drop-off point. All governments have endorsed the B-Cycle scheme and the ACCC, and obviously governments play a really vital role in procurement, and that was touched on in an earlier session as well. So we need to make sure that you're procuring brands that are paying the levy, and that you're supporting harmonization and I guess legislation that supports battery stewardship. So I'll just quickly go through, these are the steps to becoming a drop-off point. You need to go to our website. It says how to become a drop-off point. You click on that, it basically takes you to this page. You find one of our accredited collectors. You view our container protocols, and they're containers that have been designed to specifically hold used batteries and manage the risks of used batteries. you sign our commitment form, complete a risk and safety assessment plan, and then submit them back to us. And that is basically this. Again, I already touched on procurement, but again, it's really important, not just for your current products, but also the future if you are going into EV purchasing for fleets and things. And yeah, so please become a part of B-Cycle, join up and become a steward, support the scheme, and I'll be very happy and safer. And this is us. Thanks.
Thanks, Jade. We've just got time for 2 questions. Down here. We'll just wait for the mic. Oh, sorry. Joe, you can go first and we'll come back down to this one.
Is this working? Yeah. Free riders. What % are they of the incoming or the batteries that are sold in Australia? Do you know that?
Yeah, so we do it by battery product category. So it said we're focused at this time on the loose handheld batteries. So that's AA, AAA, Cs and Ds. Of that market, we have 90%, so 10% are free riders. So and actually most regulated schemes, that's pretty good. They don't even have 90%. For the power tool batteries, I can't quite remember off the top of my head. Oh, that's power tool batteries is 90%, sorry.
No, loose batteries is 90%. Power tool batteries, we're just struggling with the data at the moment, but it's somewhere between 49 and 60%. So we've got some work to do there on the power tool side of things.
Yeah.
Do you need government to come in and make it mandatory and whip them for you?
I think we'd like government, to get them to really participate, maybe not regulate the whole scheme because batteries are so complicated and evolving really quickly. But one area I would say it was surprising is the e-bike batteries and e-scooters. We have, unfortunately, a low amount of them in the scheme, and you'd think people who have e-bikes would really want their brands to participate. So I would encourage you to write to your e-bike brand and get them on board. Yes.
But let's come back to that in the panel session, I think, because I think regulate or not regulate is a really important question. Thanks, Joe. Another question here?
Just wanting to know the reason you changed to B-Cycle. We used to have a battery back program, like we got paint back, battery backs, that sort of tells you what it is. B-Cycle could be anything, like unless you see the image you might know that it's a battery, but feedback I've had, people go, oh, is it B Corp? What is B-Cycle? I don't really know what it is. So was there any sort of social research that went into creating that, or how did you come up with the name, and do you think it's effective?
Yeah, I can't speak for all of it, but so with a former hat on, I used to work for the Victorian government and ran Battery Back, and Battery Back was only the Victorian trial, essentially. It wasn't national. I thought it was a great brand, and that's fine, and I agree Paint Back is also, but we did go to tender, and we had a lot of input put into B-Cycle, and it's, B-cycling means battery recycling, but yeah, it doesn't always get everyone's, it doesn't always hook everyone, unfortunately.
Was it a marketing company that came up with it, but was it based on any research? Because, I guess we've already created a brand that people knew about. I didn't realise it wasn't national, but it was just a brand we all knew about, so we thought, why did you change it, Get it.
It was more complex, I guess. There was market research that went into it. There was also some ownership of the previous brand that wasn't ours. So started with something fresh and new, I guess. Yeah. And it has been well received, but marketing is going to be a big push for us too in the next year to raise that awareness. That was one of the objectives that Jay's discussed. Anyway, let's move on.
Sorry.
Next, I'd like to invite, Dr. Linda Mitchell to the table. She's the Science Research and Innovation Manager at Tyre Stewardship Australia, and we'll continue on with similar themes. Thanks, Linda.
Thank you. So as I said, I'm Linda. I'm the Science Research and Innovation Manager at Tyre Stewardship Australia. And I'm again going to kind of change direction a little bit, skew us off into sort of a bit more of a specific conversation that I think is probably happening across a lot of different waste streams and a lot of different areas of what we've talked about today, but specifically looking at end-of-life tyres. So it will be really deep diving into some of the conversations we're having about health, environment and safety impacts of end-of-life tyres. So I'm going to start by just giving you a bit of an introduction as to the scale of the issue, how many tyres we have in Australia, as well as who we are as Tyre Stewardship Australia. touch on some of the market development solutions for end-of-life tyres, and then do a deep dive into the global research review we did on this topic, some of the knowledge gaps that we identified, and some of the research that we are now doing. So, to give you an idea of how many tyres there are in Australia and what our stewardship scheme is set up to help support. So in Australia, there is over 459,000 tyres generated every year, end-of-life tyres, and these are split into a few different types of tyres, so passenger tyres, truck and bus, and off-the-road tyres. These numbers are from last year, so these numbers are actually bigger, but I didn't have a nice, pretty colourful graph for this year's number. But then if we really dive into what that actually means from a recovery perspective, so in Australia, we recover about 70% of our tyres, either by reuse or by recovery themselves, whereas around about 30% of our tyres are either dumped or put into landfill or buried. A lot of these are our mining tyres and our agricultural tyres that aren't recovered because of a few limitations there. When we do look at the tyre numbers that are recovered, around about 20% of them are recovered domestically, so used onshore in markets here, and about 80% of those are recovered via export, either in reuse or in recovery solutions. So what do these numbers mean and for TSA? So who we are... So TSA is the National Product Stewardship Scheme for end-of-life tyres, and we're set up to manage this scheme, and we have a couple of different mechanisms to do so. So one of these is our accreditation and compliance program. So this is going out and accrediting retailers, collectors and recyclers to just safely and responsibly manage tyre disposal. And really what this is aimed at is decreasing that 30% that is currently not captured because of free riders, because of various factors that aren't, that are because of the situation at the moment. Another big key area that we work in is in market development, and so market development is really facilitating new and innovative markets for end-of-life tyre products. So once a tyre does get to a recycler, it can be processed down into shredded material, down into granules or crumb rubber, and reused into new markets there. So a big part of our market development program and focus is increasing this 20% of domestic recovered end-of-life tyres, so making sure that we can, facilitate safe and sustainable markets onshore. So what are some of these markets? So I'm going to take you through a couple of some of the successful projects that we've worked on since starting the scheme. So a big area that we work in is in crumb rubber modified bitumen and roads. So crumb rubber can be added as a binder modifier and used in asphalt pavements, and this really improves the durability and flexibility of our roads, extension of life. We have funded over 24 projects to date, and these projects are looking into the research as well as demonstration trials with local councils and updating specifications to ensure that supporting can be captured in projects. Another way that we support new research is supporting innovation. So permeable pavements is a product that was born out of a research program at Melbourne University, and they've now developed a startup called Porous Lane, and that involves incorporating end-of-life tyres as an aggregate into pavements, and that just facilitates better water pass-through, whether it be in car parks to stop from flooding and pooling, or in green areas so that that water can really dissipate into the right places rather than puddle in the wrong. But there's many other opportunities for end-of-life tyres. I guess it's pretty open, the possibilities that we can meet, and there's a few quite exciting projects that we've just embarked on for this area. However, it's really important that when we facilitate these new markets, it's really important that we aren't just pushing the problem down the line. It's really important that we are aware of what materials we're putting into new products And it's also a conversation that gets brought to us a lot. We have a lot of conversation about, are these products safe? Are these products contaminated? What's in tyres? And why are we just putting it into other things? And, what are you doing about it? And so the first step for us was to really understand the problem. So what actually has been done overseas? What is going on in the world? What's the research that has been done? So we did a big deep dive into tyre-derived materials and tyre particles globally. What are the research and reports saying? And I would recommend that anybody working in a waste stream, that has potential problematic or hazardous waste, do this, because there's a lot of learnings that you can gather from stuff that other people have done overseas. So where we started was a few key products that we see a lot of in Australia. So that was looking at crumb rubber in roads and paths, looking at rubber granules used in playgrounds and play surfaces, so like your softball playgrounds or your gym mats, and rubber granules used in performance infill in synthetic turf fields. I couldn't get up here and do a talk about tyre particles and microplastics without addressing the elephant in the room, which is tyre and road wear particles. This is a big conversation piece. It's a big issue that is happening globally. It's not just in Australia, it's all over the world, wherever we use tyres. And tyre and road wear particles are the tyre particles that get produced between the abrasion of a tyre and a road surface. It's a mixture of tyre tread, it's a mixture of road surface materials, and it makes up about a third of the microplastic pollution released into the ocean. So it's a massive, real and complex issue. The problem is that it's a different issue to what we are facing at Tyre Stewardship Australia, because it's a different particle for many multitudes of reasons, and often there's a lot of miscommunication around the science, the research, what's going on with these materials ending up in our environment. And so a big focus for us was to, take a look at the problem at hand and then figure out actually what are the separate issues that we're dealing with. To kind of give you an example of what I mean by this, the tyre particles that we're dealing with are actually very different in size. So a tyre and road wear particle, which is on the left-hand side, is very small, microscopic. If you don't like numbers, I've got a helpful little size chart up here. So if you think about the width of a strand of hair, it's probably about 40 microns is around about the small size. So tyre and road wear particles can actually be smaller than that. And on the larger end, it's probably about a piece of dental floss if you're still using dental floss. Crumb rubber, on the other hand, is probably the size that we tend to use in roads, is about 0.5 mil or 30 mesh if that's what you tend to, if that's the size term that you use. And that'd be more like a piece of spaghetti. That's uncooked spaghetti. So if it's cooked, it's a bit bigger. I'm also celiac, so if it's gluten-free spaghetti, it's also different. So just bear that in mind. But that'd be what you'd be thinking about with crumb rubber. So it's a much larger particle. Then when we've got rubber granules that are used in surfacing, they're even bigger now. So, at the larger end of the scale, that'd be about the size of your USB cord, which I don't have up here to show you, but I think we're all using cords. So this is just to give you one example of how these materials are so different, just using size and as an example, but I could talk about their shape, I could talk about their composition, I could talk about their transport and flow through the environment. But what we really realised through this process was, because they're different, we need to treat them differently, and we need to look at their research separately. And we can take learnings from each component, but we really need to assess them uniquely. So what did the research say? Well, for crumb rubber, we looked at a few different, what we could find in terms of research reports on crumb rubber modified asphalt, and looked at the research around volatiles and leachate, and promisingly they weren't above air quality or water standards at those testing locations. Also, they showed that there were similar emissions profiles whilst laying that pavement when you were laying a conventional pavement. So no indication of increased health risks or environmental risks from using that product. From a rubber granules perspective, used in playgrounds and in non-slip surfaces, there was more research done into this, particularly around the health impacts. There was lab field testing, emissions and leachate testing, looking at hundreds and hundreds of fields around US, Canada and Europe, and there was no indication of an increased health risk to people playing on these sports surfaces and fields. There were minor environmental risks identified as potential areas of concern. So, for example, zinc contamination was raised as a potential issue, and particle loss from surfaces that could enter the environment was raised quite a few times as well. For tyre and roadwear particles, there were international studies. A lot of them were lab-based studies rather than field-based studies, and there are a few different results from these studies, but overall, at current environmental concentrations, there is a low acute toxicity observed, and some preliminary studies on human health impacts. However, they haven't been, they need to be developed further. So I'm not just up here to tell you about the research and to tell you about, what we found, but also we had a lot of learnings along the way about what is it we can actually do to minimise these residual risks. The results were promising. We were really pleased that we didn't find anything too problematic. However, there's always more that you can do. And for us, we really wanted to get up and, suggest some of those, risk mitigation strategies that we can all play a role in. So for crumb rubber in roads and paths, in a design and construction perspective, it's really about embedding safe work practices for any pavement construction, and warm mix asphalt demonstrates lower emissions across all pavement types. And of course, I don't need to, again, preaching to the choir, I don't need to talk about how important maintenance, repair and end-of-life recovery is, again, for all products, but of course for crumb rubber modified asphalt as well. For rubber granules in non-slip and playground surfaces, a few recommendations would be if there's issues seen around release of particles from these materials, grill drains and pit traps around playgrounds, as well as bunding. The surface or the edge of a playground is probably the most likely to see damage, and so putting a protective barrier around that could really just mitigate a lot of those issues. And then, of course, a very simple recommendation would be putting shade to protect that playground and extend its life. For rubber granules and performance infills, there was a lot of work out about this actually, about what's the best way to keep infill on a field. And so a lot of that from a early stage perspective would be transport and storage, as well as constructing drains and pit traps again, as well as councils and owners and users of these fields really just ensuring that these traps and filters are cleaned appropriately, maintained, cleaned, and education to users to keep that rubber on the field. And for tyre and roadwear particles, design at the beginning to modify car, tyre and road designs to reduce wear rate. I know that's a big thing to throw out there, but it is something that needs to happen because tyre wear is a big issue. And, if until that happens, of course, capture and removal strategies are important. And even as users, we can have, driving behaviour and tyre maintenance practices to incorporate to minimise our own production of tyre wear. So what did the literature overall say? So based on what we determined from, lab, field, all these different research reports, for tyre-derived products, they were deemed safe to use in Australian markets with an overall minor risk to human health and the environment. However, best practice measures do exist to reduce any potential risk caused by mismanagement of products and knowledge gaps. From a tyre and roadwear perspective, tyre and roadwear particles research indicated that at current concentrations, there's a minor risk towards the environment and human health. However, the volume of unintentional microplastic release is a real pollution and litter issue that continues to increase, and it definitely requires a solution to prevent potentially irreversible harm. I don't think tyres are going anywhere, so this is something that we really need to put our thinking caps on to figure out how we can reduce this. And just to wrap up, of course, not all the answers were out there and what we were looking for, and there's a lot of research that we've embarked on now to really develop relevant research to Australian tyres and the Australian environment, because of course we went global and of course not everything is as applicable. If you're interested in all the research and reading all the reports that we found, we've handily compiled them in a nice document that you can find on our website, or also we've got copies out on our stand if you want to come chat to us. And we're also conducting some new research projects. So we've committed to 5 new research projects to fill these knowledge gaps. These projects include testing new tyres, testing old tyres, processed tyre samples, tyre-derived material, freight transport, capture, contain and risk mitigation strategies. And these projects are aimed at providing industry and community with evidence-based research, the confidence to safely use these tyre materials in our circular economy. And we're not alone. There's a few other industries out there that are working on these exact issues globally and in Australia. We're working quite closely with the Sustainable Communities and Waste Hub as part of the National Environment Science Program, who are aligning a lot of similar research to us to really understand the crux of this problem and figure out how we can get a national waste monitoring program to really understand chemicals of concern better, because it's a problem across our entire industry that we really need to understand. And tyres are kind of at the front of that because it gets brought to us a lot, and so we're kind of trying to address that head on. And then, of course, globally, tyre and roadwear particles and other tyre industry projects are happening as well. But yeah, that's it from me. Thanks everyone for listening. Happy to take any questions.
No, we might just quickly move on though, because we are running out of time a little bit. So our final speaker is Miss Jane Street. She's the Stakeholder Engagement Manager for the Australian Bedding Council. Put your hands together for Jane.
Hello everybody. I'm feeling pretty nervous. I don't get let out of the home very often, so here I am. Bear with me. You are the last group of the conference, so thanks for sticking around. It's really nice actually to go last because I've been really inspired by the conversations and what you have been sharing. Claire with textiles has a brilliant strategy. Jade in batteries is showing the rapid delivery within 18 months. Linda with tyres has shown the in-depth research that is possible. And here I am today with mattresses. So I'll see what I can impart before I depart. So, yes, I'm Jane. I'm the Stakeholder Engagement Manager for the Australian Bedding Stewardship Council. My accent sounds like bidding. I'm talking mattresses, bedding, just to be really clear. Thanks for staying awake. I know it's been hard, especially after the conference dinner last night. I'm going to be talking about mattresses and sleep, so if you do feel like closing your eyes, I really don't mind. I'd probably feel more comfortable if it was a room full of sleeping people. So, okay, enough banter. Have you seen our new video campaign? We launched it about a month ago, only on socials. Let's have a look. There's no sound. Okay, it's really dramatic, moody music. Imagine I'm on the piano and you're having a whiskey on a stormy night. I'm really not doing it justice. Some cute little ducks we got to wander in. Oh, shame. Okay, so what this is showing you is all the different scenarios that we see mattresses in our environment, you know, at the park, under the laneway. It's really depressing and dark, moody music. But then at the end we say, actually it does matter. The Australian Bedding Stewardship Council are here to save the day. Here we come in and we're saying, let's say goodnight to unsustainable bedding. So this is the first phase in the brand campaign. It's to really show that there is an issue and teasing to the fact that the Australian Bedding Stewardship Council is going to be here hand in hand with the bedding industry to start to bring you solutions. We're not there yet, but we're on our way. So the video is the first phase in our brand campaign, and as I said, it's designed to evoke an emotional response and suggest all is not lost, there is a solution to come. This is an example of some of the collateral that you'll start to see in mattress retailers, and these will be the brands that have jumped on board early with us and are participating now. And so we're here with the industry to find solutions. So, put your hand up if you love to sleep. Put your hands up if you really wouldn't mind having a nap this afternoon. Yes, all right. And perhaps if you didn't have enough sleep last night, maybe you're not feeling so rested. So I want you, come on, hands back up, to keep your hand up if you were last night thinking about what your mattress was made for as you lay down, no one, yes. Or where it came from. Oh, no, not a lot of us do. Or if you thought about how your mattress could be recycled or what the problematic materials for recycling are. Look, these are the things that have literally been keeping my team awake at night for a long time. We've all lost a lot of sleep bringing a voluntary product stewardship scheme for the bedding industry to launch, but we're here to do this for you so you can all feel nice and rested. We're really here to support the bedding industry to adopt a product stewardship approach. We're very clear that we don't have all of the bedding industry on board understanding product stewardship and leading the way. We really have an education role with the bedding industry to encourage them to understand that they do have a responsibility for the products that they put out onto the market and to adopt the product stewardship fee to enable the ABSC to do all this really great work for them. So we did quietly launch in March. I know no one saw the campaign. You couldn't hear it today. We are so sneaky and quiet and low-key. The reason the launch date was in March was because that was essentially the date that our federal government grant ended and the date where we should have transitioned over to a fully industry funded model. We have some exceptional members, there they are, there's all of our proud current members. We're now working with these members to transition them over to that product stewardship fee model. So the manufacturers, importers and retailers of mattresses that are represented up here, we're working to transition them over from paying an annual membership fee to paying a $10 product stewardship fee per mattress. Our supply chain and associate members, they are staying on supporting us through our annual membership fee. So I'm a little presumptuous here, but if you like what I'm saying today, I've got a bit more to say, but if you're thinking, hey, this is something interesting, hey, I've got some ideas, please consider associate membership. It's open very broadly, and the type of organisation we are is that we love to have new ideas and diverse interests coming in. That's how this scheme is going to move forward. Mattresses are a really problematic material, so we need inventors, creative people, engineers. We welcome you all. So our immediate focus is end-of-life mattresses. So we say there's approximately 1.8 million mattresses reaching the end of life in Australia each year. That's based on a sales figure of an estimated 2.2 million. So obviously not all mattresses get disposed of. You reuse them in your home, you pass them on to friends and families, you send them off to charity shops, etc. This 1.8 million figure is going to escalate in future years. During the COVID period, there was a massive change in the mattress industry. Before COVID, so about 2019, the ABSC's membership represented about 80% of the mattresses manufactured in Australia. So at that point, we had very solid ground to develop a product stewardship scheme because we had such a strong piece of the market. During COVID, however, we saw the emergence of bed-in-a-box mattresses. So these are the ones that can be rolled up into a cardboard box. they get delivered to home. You make sure you put it in the bedroom before you unbox it, because if you unbox it, it sort of puffs up in your kitchen or lounge, and then you've still got to get up the stairs. This is like a convenience mattress. You open it up, you give it a day to sort of take its shape, and away you go. Now, that sort of online import market used to be about 20% of the market share in Australia. It's now up to 50%. So there's been conversations and questions around free riding. It's this online import of these value range mattresses. So predominantly they are foam-based, although some do have some really neat spring technology, which again is super problematic for recycling. So with these new mattresses coming in, they also have a reduced lifespan. Typically, we say a mattress has 10 years before it should be sort of turned over or end of life. These newer foam-based bed-in-a-box mattresses typically have a 5 to 6 year warranty on them. So we're going to start to see more foam-based mattresses presenting to landfills and transfer stations sooner than we'd like. The table there, hopefully you've all had a chance to review it while I've been babbling on. It's showing you the key materials in the mattress. PU foam is polyurethane foam. Used to be the most common foam used in mattresses. Again, that trend has significantly changed with these online imported bed-in-a-box. We're now looking at memory foam and latex becoming increasingly popular. We don't have scaled up commercial recycling solutions for those. Okay, so 1.8 million mattresses, approximately 740,000 of these ending up in landfill. That actually says we're doing okay, that there are mattresses coming through councils, coming through to recycling. However, the big problem is not all of the mattress can be recycled. So as much as 64% of the weight of those materials still ends up in landfill. So we're investing in recycling. The steel spring set is coming out. Some of the foam can sometimes be recycled depending on where you are in Australia. The rest is still going to landfill. And that's the key area where we need to step up our game and invest in research and development. We were added to the Minister's priority list for product stewardship in November. The key action for the ABSC and the bedding industry is to demonstrate an increase in industry participation by December. That's no mean feat when you come to a voluntary scheme. Lots of meetings, lots of encouraging conversations, lots of agreements to participation in theory, and then we hand over the piece of paper to sign, which means, you are now passing through this $10 fee, and that's where we are at the moment. We've got lots of interest. We just need to move them through to the next stage. We also do have the ACCC authorisation to deliver this bedding stewardship scheme for 5 years. So there's really 4 key factors that are impacting mattress material recovery in Australia and globally. So although we don't have a lot happening in Australia right now, the same challenges are experienced globally, and we're so privileged that we have fantastic global networks. So we work with the Mattress Recycling Council in California, the National Bed Federation in UK, and some other European organisations, and there's a fantastic sharing of knowledge. So we're well equipped in that space. There's little commercial incentive to invest in recovering an end-of-life mattress. So it actually costs more to dispose of the unwanted mattress materials than the income a recycler will gain from essentially the scrap steel. So the springs have a value, although I think we refer to it as dirty steel. It's a low value. And sometimes some of the recyclers have to pay a scrap metal recycler to take it away, because these kind of baled springs or the loose springs are very damaging on the metal recyclers' equipment. They don't love it. So with steel springs being the only recoverable material with a guaranteed market, it's not a great business proposition for investment. So what you can see there is a bale of recovered textiles and foam. Now it kind of looks like someone has pulled a mattress apart, carefully pulled out the foam and the layers, they've put it into a baler, it's been baled, and it's ready for something to happen to it. what happens is that bale goes to landfill at the moment. There are no markets for this. The reason it's getting baled is because they have the equipment on site, and it's a really efficient way for them to move it from where it's recycled to the landfill, you know. So this is some of the realities that we are seeing. The quilted layers on a mattress. So we've had a few conversations over the conference about textiles. When it comes to mattress textiles, they're quite different. We refer to them as quilted layers, so it could be any number of different textiles or fabrics that are heavily stitched and glued together. They can't be easily separated. If you were to separate them, you might get 5 or 6 different kinds of fabrics. There's not markets for those. So the solutions there are, of course, if our designers would design mattresses differently to like what they have in Europe, where it's just a zip-off cover that's a homogeneous material that can be pulled off and recycled, awesome. The Australian bedding market is quite different, and they really value the beautiful fabrics and the beautiful designs of mattresses. That's a key selling point when you're in a shop. So many challenges there. The good news, I do have some good news, the polyurethane foam that is in mattresses, that can be used by carpet underlay manufacturers. So we have Dunlop Flooring, who are based in Sydney. We have Airstep, who are based in Victoria. They can use portions of the recovered mattress foam, shred it up and into their carpet underlay products. So that is where there are some local markets for mattress recyclers operating around Sydney, Melbourne, even into our recycler in Adelaide is able to access those markets effectively. 2 minutes! Wow, I've really babbled. Thanks for that, Libby. Okay, so I'll try and do this quick. Wellness trends. There's a lot of wellness branding and marketing in mattresses. This is only going to cause us more problems at the end of the line. So we have these beautiful gels that have charcoal infusion, green tea infusion. They're going to give you a great detoxified sleep. We have these gels that, you know, manage your body temperature while you sleep. It's wonderful marketing, and in the shop, it'll pull you to their brand versus someone else. At the end of the day, though, we have to deal with them from a recycling point. We have limited commercial mattress recycling services. Some of you will know Soft Landing. They've been the commercially viable mattress recycler in Australia for some time. We also now have Bounce Back in Australia and a number of other companies offering shredding solutions. This is just a picture here to remind us that we sometimes need to look in different spots for our solutions. This is a prototype for a bed base that's made from recycled plastic voids. The company that makes these recycled plastic voids do so for construction and concrete. Now, just RoboVoid have become one of our associate members because they're curious, they love a challenge, they're engineers, and they love a great chat. So they've come on and said, sure, let's have a go at this. This is something that could replace timber bases in the future. We're focused just on mattresses at the moment, but look, we're looking for solutions everywhere. Okay, I have about 30 seconds. I'm going to skip through this, but we are doing research and development. It's going to be really good. Keep in touch with us and I'll tell you more about it. These are our approved recyclers. I'm really proud to present them today. It's our first 5. The coverage is more so Victoria and New South Wales. We have got a few more that are under review and a few more under application. So building this approved recycler network is key. It's not accreditation. It doesn't cost the recyclers anything. What we are ensuring is that they have integrity. They're doing what they're saying they're doing. They're investing in continuous improvement. Hey, social enterprise. We've got Resource Recovery Australia here, and we've also got Lockyer Regional Council here. Both of them are involved in using social enterprise for mattress recycling. The key point here is that when you engage with social enterprise, you can achieve a higher recovery rate than if you engage with a shredding sort of volume reduction recycling option, so up to 75%. More importantly is that it provides employment and skills trainings for people who really need it. And the workers are amazing. Recycling a mattress manually is dirty. It's hard work. You know, mattresses are 40 kilos plus at end of life, so they do an incredible job. I have run out of time, So this is what I'm going to do. Anyone here from a council who has a problem with mattresses and wants to chat, I'm going to hang around. There's some really simple things that you can do on a council site to allow a relationship with a social enterprise to work together to manually dismantle mattresses. Oh yeah, I'm almost in there. Give me one more minute. Can I have one more minute? I just want to share this with you because this is great. So the Mattress Recycling Council in California, they have about 1.6 million mattresses a year. So by volume, it's very similar to Australia. They are so great that they have shared with us their life cycle analysis tool, which means that we then get to play with their tool and apply it to Australian conditions. What I just wanted to show here is what the tool has shown to us is that recycling one mattress avoided 21 kilograms of CO2, or the equivalent of driving 100 kilometres. Recycling one mattress saves a huge amount of water, that's 1890 litres. So we don't want to waste a single mattress. I know they look problematic and ugly, but when you do the life cycle analysis and you look at the water and energy savings, not to mention all of the benefits you get from pulling them out of landfill, it's a really good investment. I know I said at the start it's a bad investment, but I've changed my mind. It's a good investment. So, become an associate member, or become an approved recycler, or just come and chat to me. Or the final thing I would like to leave you with is really as a consumer, you know, I'm sure you're all going to go home, hopefully, or back to your hotel tonight and lie on your bed and you'll think of me. That sounded really bad. That's not what I meant. But, you know, as a consumer, think about your purchasing power. Now that there is a stewardship scheme that is evolving, you have the power of choice to shop with one of the participating brands. And that is a power position for consumers that is only going to build. Thank you for your time.
Thanks, Jane.
Please, no questions.
Okay, 2 quick questions for Jane before we open it up. Down here.
Hi Jane, it's Tolga from Tyre Stewardship Australia.
Oh,
I know we've
Tolga.
emailed a few times.
Hello.
I don't know if you know this, but I was actually involved in the launch of Australia's first automated mattress recycling facility.
Yes.
Formerly known as Tick
Tick.
Mattress Recycling, now Soft Landing. But that's not why I asked the question. So I just.
But you know what you're talking
but
about.
I completely understand the inherent challenges in recycling mattresses. And I know that at the end of life, a mattress can be 15 kilograms heavier than when you purchased it. That's
Do you want to tell us why?
Dead skin cells.
So now when you go to bed tonight, you're going to think of Tolga and all his dead skin cells. But yeah, you're right. It's sweat and skin and dust mites. Yeah.
The question I wanted to ask is, I know that throughout this conference, there's been a lot of talk about behavioural change. And I know that from a tyres perspective, we talk about people driving behaviour, extending the life of your tyres, getting them maintained. And I guess from a bedding stewardship perspective, what do you see your role in that space in terms of educating consumers on how they can keep their mattresses for longer?
Yeah, great question. Yeah. I've grossed everyone out now. So, great question. So first of all, follow the manufacturer's instructions. If you look carefully, they will say to regularly vacuum your mattress, to turn it over regularly. Don't steam clean it. Putting steam or water on the mattress only creates a better environment for gross stuff to grow. So that's the first thing. Obviously, using good hygiene is another way to extend the life. These all sound a bit funny, but one of the things that the ABSC is going to do is we've recently become a social enterprise partner of Charitable Recycling Australia, and we want to work with Charitable Recycling Australia to develop a health and safety standard for the reuse of mattresses. So no matter where you are in your life, you know, you choose to turn over your mattress for a number of different reasons. If the mattress is still relatively good quality and it's being cared for well, there is a fantastic opportunity still for reuse. where we have a duty of care and want to ensure that, often second-hand mattresses are going into vulnerable homes, or they get rehomed through charities that are going into vulnerable people. It's of optimum importance for us that that mattress has been sanitised carefully, and so the steam cleaning, as I said, is not so great. There's a UV disinfectant light that will only do the surface layers. So we want to work with the charitable sector to come up with a health and safety standard that they can achieve in their current operations. That would be great. There's so many mattresses that are returned within a comfort return is the other thing. You might try it for 100 days and return it. There's a really good pathway for that into reuse. The one thing that the industry is not a fan of is the reskinning. So the last growth factor is, people pick up mattresses off the side of the road. They see the opportunity there to take off the old quilted textile, put on a new one, and they'll sell that through, Facebook Marketplace and Gumtree and all these places. I think they call it a scam in a van in the UK at the moment, and there's a big campaign about that because it looks to the consumer like a clean, fresh mattress, and it's not until, look, you may never discover what's really inside. This is the thing. But look, so thanks, Tolga.
Thank you.
Thanks,
Jane.
Thank you very much, Jane. And I think what this whole panel has demonstrated to us is that it doesn't matter what stage of development a stewardship scheme is, a lot of the issues that we're facing are the same. And one of the key things I think that particularly this audience can really share with is how to, one, build up participation by encouraging through procurement or through your permitting processes to join schemes and be part of the process, but also that behavioural change piece. And Gail highlighted an important one around awareness. We definitely have a huge opportunity there. And I think getting back to the point we made in the very first discussion is that we need to leverage all of the different communication options that we have, and each council in the room has a big part to play in that, and I think each one of us would like to partner with you guys to make sure that we do this effectively. We've got just a couple more minutes. Are there any more burning strategic questions that we have over here?
Thanks. Sam from Hawkesbury Council. I think one of the big challenges local governments face is, I run a landfill, and what price am I charging consumers to be able to drop their products there? Obviously batteries I'm able to offer for free, but if you're charging $10 for the mattress, I can guarantee that none of the charitable recyclers will be able to offer me anything less than that for me to offer it to a community to recycle or repurpose. So I suppose I'm interested in ideas about how we can work together to get to a price point where, yes, a consumer may have to pay to recycle without charging, $60 to $100 per mattress for that recycling. And I know that's a big challenge for regional New South Wales, but even certainly in Sydney.
Jane?
Thank you. It's a really great question. So it's a challenge. One thing that I would ask councils to look at is the cost of putting a mattress in landfill currently. So where I am in Queensland, my local council calculated that one mattress into the landfill cost them $82. And so that, in terms of a full council decision, when presented, to management, was enough for the council to understand that asking for a gate fee of $20 or $25 was actually really reasonable in terms of the whole cost, the true cost of mattresses to landfill. So it's certainly in that case about education to residents. The second piece, I didn't speak about rebates at all today because we've only just started, but in the modelling for the bedding stewardship program, once the bedding industry is paying in on the product stewardship fee to a point where the scheme is financially viable, there is a plan to provide recycling rebates, and that will be based on the level of resource recovery. So there will come a time where councils and other recyclers are entitled to a rebate, which will also help with that. The other option, of course, is You can contract in someone who will shred mattresses, and regional rural councils, it's quite a good option when they already have someone coming in to shred their green waste, tyres and other things. So there's now a number of recyclers who will offer that service for mattresses as well. It's really a bulk volume reduction service, but at the bare minimum you're pulling the steel out.
And I think with some products it makes sense to ban them from landfill. Batteries are probably a good example of that. That, you know, the potential for fires in landfills, not to mention the whole system, is so big. So it's a combination of getting the price points right and the regulatory policy decisions around it to also support the right behaviours. Next question.
Hi, my question is, what are the plans and actions stewardship schemes are planning for reaching regional and remote communities? There's plenty of local councils in regional and remote Australia who have stockpiles of mattresses and tyres, and they can't afford to bring someone out to shred them or process them or transport them because they don't have those economies of scale.
Linda, how about you go for that one?
Yeah, it's definitely a big issue. We face it a lot with tyre stockpiles. We see a lot of dumped tyres that end up in regional remote areas. And we also see a lot of big mining tyres and big agricultural tyres that just have no solutions rurally and regionally at the moment. I can't sit and say that we have a solution at this point, but we have just spent a long period of time on a business case for regional and remote areas in Australia to understand unique solutions for each key area. So, you know, Queensland and how that's different to Western Australia. And then that's separate to a business case that we've done specifically for the mining industry and the agricultural sector. So there's unique challenges there in terms of how big the tyres are and transport of those tyres. So is it portable shredding equipment? Is it, transfer stations to, as halfway points? Is it reversed logistics? It's just weighing up the costs and benefits of all those different mechanisms and tailoring it to unique areas in Australia as well. So I can't answer the question, but I can say that we are working on it. Yeah.
And we've got a question over here.
It's me, Jade Barnaby, Noosa Council. Mattresses and tyres with remote and rural, regional areas, they've got to get there somehow. And you've got retailers selling mattresses, you've got mining companies taking tyres. The truck's got to get there on the way back. There's got to be an empty truck, one would think. Just a logistical issue. My question was, though, with regard to textiles, and we've got the clothing industry now talking about textiles, and I realise your textiles are complex and closely sewn. Is there an opportunity or a synergy between those two stewardships to look at the textiles and how the textiles are dealt with?
Yes.
That's it. Thank you. That was it.
I think there's a lot of synergies between all schemes, and we need to be doing a better job of working together and supporting each other, and it's just lovely to have these conversations because you realise just how much we have in common and how much we need to be working together to support the work that you're all doing. Yeah.
Just to your point, a few of our collectors actually work in reverse logistics for the batteries, so some of them go out to deliver products to these places and do bring them back. Yes, you're absolutely right, but yeah, something to consider.
I have a question for Jade and Linda. I noticed in your presentations you didn't talk much about reuse, and I wondered, from a battery perspective, is there any discussion about, for household batteries having rechargeable batteries? And from a tyre perspective, is there much discussion about how to drive more retreading of the tyres as opposed to just end-of-life recycling options?
Yeah, actually, Kat, I thought you were going to take this a different direction when you said that. So obviously we encourage people to use reusable rechargeable handheld batteries, the lithium batteries. The alkaline batteries are the single-use ones, and they Funnily, we have a easier way of recycling them now onshore in Australia. But what I thought you were going to do is look at things like reuse of electric vehicle batteries and the larger lithium batteries. So people that know the manufacturing, the products, when the battery in your laptop or EV dies, the majority of the cells are still viable. And so there are companies that are looking to take them out, refurbish and reuse them in energy storage batteries, for example. So we don't have a direct policy or haven't incorporated that yet into the scheme, but it's definitely something we're aware of and we'll be working on. Yeah.
For the retreading question, there's a big retread industry for truck tyres in Australia, and we really do push and encourage any fleet operators to become part of our scheme and retread their tyres, but there is no retreading industry for passenger tyres in Australia. There's also mechanisms for agriculture tyres and mining tyres that have tyres on site to be able to repair and reuse. So it is possible, but it's a different challenge for each material. And of course, because you're dealing with such a safe material that you rely so heavily on for safety, a lot of tyres get to a point where they wouldn't be able to be retread or repaired anyway based on the safety of that material. So it's really, yeah, that's kind of what we're working on, yeah.
Thank you. Question coming from Sam up the back there.
Thank you. Hi, Sam Lawson from MRA Consulting Group. This question's for Jane. You mentioned that when you're recycling a mattress, you pull off the quilted material and you might be able to separate that into, 5 or 6 different materials, but you were quite ominous about the markets where those materials could go. So with the other stewardship schemes, we can see, innovation and potential market development. There's like some hope there. You didn't really put that across. So if there's no hope for developing a market, are we not going to regulate the way that mattresses are made in Australia and adopt like the European model?
So we don't have any powers to regulate, but we certainly have the power to advocate for regulation, and we have the power to have strong conversations with, our members who are designing and our supply chain who provide those fabrics. The hope at the moment for what we call the quilted layers is they go through a shredding process with the foam. We're doing a project with Swinburne Uni in Victoria where they're going to cryogenically freeze those particles and grind them right down so they're all very homogeneous and small. Then we're doing characterisation on that as an input and looking at what their thermal properties are. So as a textile, no, because the separation is too difficult, but blended and shredded with the other mattress components that don't have a market, there is certainly an input. Now, I haven't spoken about energy for waste either. That's the other area. So the mattress recyclers that are involved in just shredding mattresses and just recovering the steel, they're working to supply cement kilns with, the foam and the textile, again, blended in with other materials. Of course, across all the states are at different stages of regulation and acceptance, but for the recyclers that might be processing 1,000 mattresses a day, that's an avenue for them. And look, we support that. It's the bottom of the hierarchy, and you would have seen quite clearly that's where mattresses are at the moment, but we're aspirational to keep working up.
I think that's a nice segue, Sam, into just circling back round to Joe's question about whether to regulate or not to regulate. And I think it's worth looking at what works about regulation and what works about voluntary. And what are the biggest challenges that all of us face? And I think we would all agree that free riders and participation is the key thing. So let's regulate for that, but not regulate for how does it operate, what is the levy set at, all of those sort of more operational things, because what that allows is for us to be flexible in the way we implement things. Batteries are changing so quickly, textiles research is changing. How do we create an environment in which that participation is there, but we have the flexibility to respond to real world reality? Any more? Oh, there's still one more question, okay.
Sorry, I think I've asked a question every session I've been in. I'm that person this week. Hayley Jarrett from the Supply Chain Sustainability School. I also wear the hat as a Director of Responsible Steel, which is a steel stewardship scheme around the globe. One of the challenges that we've had in developing our scheme was around trying to get that multi-stakeholder engagement. So trying to get business and customer input into the standard, also looking at the NGO sector and looking for their best practice and implementing it into a stewardship standard and scheme. How have you incorporated broader stakeholder engagement, not just the industry practitioners in your schemes?
I can start on that. Yeah, we've looked at the whole value chain, and I think I talk about stewards as in the brands and retailers who pay into the scheme, but they're not the only members of the scheme. So the recyclers, local authorities, state government, other collection and sorting organisations are all categorically encouraged to join as members of the scheme. There's no fee for that, and that's what I talked about before, is you can't just pull one lever at one part of the supply chain and have a conversation about how do you recycle textiles, how do you recycle clothing without having the recyclers in the room, without having the collectors in the room. What the recyclers are telling us is, we can sell this product, but we can't get the specification of the sorted clothing, good enough quality at scale. So that's our kind of market failure that we're looking to solve in other places. It's the markets for that offtake product, right? If you can't sell it, what's the point of collecting and recycling it? You're never gonna. You gotta look at all of those elements to it.
Maybe I'll just go back to the slide where I had the years that led up to the stewardship scheme and all the different players and stakeholders involved, and probably Libby could speak to this more, but yeah, extensive stakeholder engagement was done through levels of government, industry, consumers. We did the consumer research before we launched. So, and we still, anyone, even if you don't want to collect a battery, if you think you do not even ever use a battery, which we know isn't true, you can join and become a member. So yeah.
Yeah, and just to add to the stakeholder list, like a lot of the work we do is around research and development with universities and, trialling and research institutes. So it's involving the thinkers and the people that are coming up with these solutions, because we can do all this hard work to collect and, to recover this material, but they're the change makers that are going to create new products. And so it's about involving them in the conversation and getting them on board as well. Yeah.
I want to be really honest, is that the consultation for the scheme design was really focused on the bedding industry and the waste and resource recovery industry. There'd been many years leading up to us achieving the grant to build the model. But why that was critical is our product stewardship fee, all our modelling said our fee needed to be $17.50, and the bedding industry completely rejected that. So if we had continued along that line, I wouldn't be here today. So the bedding industry really had the control in the design of the scheme, in terms of we had to come up with a fee that they would accept, and so that was that $10 fee. So we really did hone in just with our industry, and now that we've got it over the line, now we're stepping back and inviting a lot more people to come in. The scheme is still flexible, and of course the more investment we get, we can plan year upon year to do different things.
One of the things I think really worked for us is that instead of just having brands on our board, we have the whole life cycle reflected, and I think that's been really healthy in terms of setting policy and making decisions and being able to be quite adaptive and make decisions that will really lead to solutions. But the other thing that's been really important for us is what a part of our authorisation is the member-to-member agreements clause that Jade mentioned. So once someone joins the scheme, whether they're an importer, a retailer or a recycler, through that authorisation, they're allowed to be a little bit anti-competitive by saying we'll only work with other members of the scheme, and that really has played a crucial role for us in getting broad participation. I think we might have exhausted our questions from the audience, but that was a great discussion. Really appreciate Claire's contribution, Jade, Linda and Jane. I think what they've shown is that there's a breadth of experience and some really great motivation and inspiration for making success across the board. But it's the beginning of the conversation too. Please talk to us afterwards and stay in touch, because without you guys we're not going to be as successful into the future. So thank you very much, and let's put your hands together.